of Adam and Eve? Yes. Yesterday we were looking into this particular story, and I figured today we would finish reading the second half of the book. Ah yes, the history or the story of Adam and Eve. So far, so far, we've gotten through the entire first part of the story, which seems to be the part that was put out by the CIA in the first place in their sanitized copy of the book. We read through the Cataclysms Revisited chapter that seems to be removed from the CIA version of the book. We also have this part of the book, which is even a little bit more, I guess, interesting to some people because it doesn't pop up basically anywhere. Meaning, it's not in the CIA version. None of this information seems to be online. I've only ever been able to find it in this 1993 copy. I've never actually seen a copy of it from earlier than that. So I figured this is some stuff that the CIA didn't want you to see, so let's fucking read it. Let's take a look at it and see what's going on. To the wolves of the night who, on hearing the wind of the past, howl into the future. Oh! Like a brief master, an episode, a tick of a talk, there is so little time to learn from the past. Aftermath. This looks fun. It says, cataclysms affect us in every way conceivable way imaginable. They leave nothing untouched, and for years on coming towards the cataclysms affect us in ways totally different from the years following the cataclysm. So few survive, far less than 1% of all life, that each who survives lives to tell a unique tale, whether the survival was by planning on it or intent or by sheer luck. I suppose you would call the years leading to the cataclysm the precursor. It is the most fitting to devote some time to the precursor and the definitive signs of our traversing into the past few years. Any herefore presentation on a layer of evolution has not been one dissertation concerning the effect of cataclysms on evolution. It is our props that we include at least a short dissertation in this book, since we look at the cataclysm, mutation, and interactum, should affect our thinking on many other evolutionary aspects. Thirdly, there was a lasting historical aspect of the life of Jesus over the prehistoric Mayan or Naga, and have the important influence, as you will see. We will be able to correct the long-held misconceptions we have had. Further, as it is quite apropos, we will review what Jesus has said about cataclysms. What's up, Motivated 3? What's up, D-Conduct? Alex? How's it going to everybody out there? We're doing pretty great right now. And we won't be turning up any volume or anything like that. We will be banning people, however, who complain about the volume, because you see the microphone right next to my mouth? That means that there's no possible way that you could ever not hear me. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh no, uh-oh. Did the troll with the bad subscriptions come back and just come back and trying to troll the channel and not getting his desired result? Ah. Well, I guess we'll have to pull up the live dashboard since we're going to be having some trolls up in here. That's fine. We'll just be ignoring the chat for the most part, because obviously we have Unirock's trolls up in the gang right now today, and they seem to be already being very, 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 very nasty. Very nasty. Very nasty. All right. Well, it was nice to see that guy get removed. Oh yes. Oh, wrong one. That was why. It was the wrong chat.
Here we go. Pop out chat. Perfect. He thought that he was going to be able to come in tonight and actually ruin this. That's hilarious. Sorry, Unirock Troll. Take your anti-black people stuff somewhere else. Because it ain't going to go down here. Sucker. Ooh. Sorry, bitch. Now, on to the precursor. During the 1967-1968, I was on special assignment from a huge aerospace firm on an advanced research project in high security. While on that project, I found myself conjuring up some questions on the effect of human physiology when a human is placed in extremely low magnetic fields of outer space, outer meaning beyond the radiation belts, such as astronomers encounter halfway between the Earth and our moon. On my own time, I worked out the molecular structure of proteins in the human body and on the possibility of having a low-density magnetic field environment of having a carcinogenic or cancer-generating effect. It only took me a few weeks and I arrived at two conclusions. First, the protein structure of such in muscles and the connective tissue would literally come apart after about 3 months in that environment. And second, the same duration of any person in that environment would be subjected to a general malignancy, a cancer, from head to toe. I wrote a brief paper on the results of my study and submitted it to my supervisor. It was filed away and ultimately forgotten, and I was informed that it was not within the responsibilities of my task. In 1963, there was an article on the front page of the Los Angeles Times about two scientists from Hannerman Medical College who had wondered about the same thing as I, only they decided to find the answer through experimentation with mice. They put a batch full of mice, all genetically the same strain, in aluminum cylinders about 6 inches or so in diameter, and half of the magnetic field environment is the same as we live, and the other half of the magnetic field environment being halfway between the Earth and our moon. Both sets of cylinders had the same physical environment, the same number of male and female mice, and the same food, and the same lighting, and the same play environment, and the same water supply. After 3 months, the mice in the low-density cylinders all suffered the same effects. First, these all simply came apart, all their protein structure, and second, over 35% of them suffered visible cancers which could be considered head to toe. No analysis was made of any of the cancers. Wow, look at all the spam that this guy's putting in here today. What a horrible human being we have out there. And actually, I really do like black people, son. I got a lot of black friends. Haven't you seen my Facebook? Whatever. Anyways, the answer through experimentation, the mice fell apart while being in cylinders with the same field of space. I was shocked to learn that my conceptual work had been verified by an experimental work that I immediately made a telephone call to the two scientists. They were equally shocked to learn of my work and surprised that I knew their results had recurred. My supervisor was also shocked at the accuracy of my predictions. Scientists invited me to Hanneman Medical College to spend a week with them. My company cheerfully paid the traveling expenses. During my conference with them in Philadelphia, they told me that there was something that was not going to be released to the press, and it was not generally known. Not generally known. Oh, really? It wasn't generally known? That's crazy. That's crazy. That is crazy. I mean, it's almost as crazy as the trashy piece of shit that's posting all the nasty stuff in our chat today. Just too bad. It's just too bad. It's just too bad the retard doesn't realize that he's already lost. What a fool. He must feel like one of these mites that's slowly coming apart at the seams. They hoped that I could, with them for reason, at least these would disturb them, but they told me that the mice turned criminal in their low density magnetic field environment. Criminal? I exclaimed. How the dickens do you tell when a mice turns criminal? I asked, and he says, very simple. was the answer. There are basic end-to-end cruelties for almost all mammals. Mice and humans are no exception. Cannibalism is the ultimate cruelty, and they turn cannibalistic. Even though they had plenty of the same food as the mice in the normal magnetic field strength cylinders, they indulged in the cannibalism as a preference. The mice in the normal cylinders treated each other normally and ate only their normal food. He paused for a moment. There was another thing that really confounds us, he said. These same mice who turned cannibalistic indulged in forcible rape literally around the clock. That and murder are their other end-to-end cruelties. Is it possible that you could tell the difference between rape and forcible rape in mice? I asked. It seems impossible to differentiate in mice. He says, oh yes, it happens all the time. In the animal world, for instance, sea lions and sea elephants, they use forcible rape commonly. In these mice, there's almost every act of sexual intercourse in the low-density cylinders was forcible rape, whereas in the normal cylinders we never saw it. Of course, we must assume that it may have happened when we weren't looking. Of course, in humans it's easy to differentiate between forcible rape and rape, I have offered. Legally, it may not be so easy to differentiate, he replied, but morally, I guess it's easy. But what we're interested in is why they resorted to forcible rape. Because of the environment of low-density magnetic field, we were going to hoping that you would give us at least a concept to go on. I told him of my work that did involve the study of legends concerning civilizations in the years leading to cataclysms. When Earth's magnetic field was decreasing at an increasing rate, they approached the null zone, and in every instance it appeared that criminality, essentially man's inhumanity to man, appeared to be overwhelming. Even the Navajo Indians spoke of it in their legends of the approach to the cataclysm, but they called it adultery. It's quite possible that their definition of rape in any other form, be it forcible or not, would have been included in the term of adultery. After all, my area of study, it seems strange that it had not entered my mind that rape and forcible rape are part of overwhelming criminality in the precursor period preceding a cataclysm. Later I concluded that it was because I was searching for the facts and it never appeared to me before in print. To assume it to be a natural part of the overwhelming criminality, however, seemed a proper assumption. After some consideration I gave them my conclusion, and I would commit that lowering or lowered magnetic field environment could give its occupants an impending sense of doom. Certainly there would be a feeling that something out of control was destroying them, so why not get what they want irrespective of the consequences? In the case of humans, those without empathy will turn criminal first. In the case of animals, it is proper to assume that there is little or no empathy to start with. After my trip from Philadelphia, I examined the statistics around the world, and the United Nations was reporting huge increases in rape in every nation, regardless of economic status.
Space has always been the new frontier. But maybe now more than
The
ever.
fuck?
As satellites are getting smaller and cheaper, more and more businesses are...
Interesting. The next thing, after my trip home, regardless of the economic status, intellectual, societal, morals, governmental status, family structure, plus whether the nation was in a temperate or torrid zone, regardless of the ethnicity, religion, or whether the nation had an official state religion, the staggering rise of rape worldwide was a leading factor to the rise of the general crime rate around the world. In that of 1960s and 1970s, I was giving speeches on the subject of cataclysmology all over the United States. I remember predicting after presenting the whole picture that by 1990 crime would be at such a level in our country that law enforcement agencies would not be able to cope with it. Those of us who are old enough to remember to see the everyday traffic violations that would have immediately drawn citations now ignored by police, they are simply too busy. It has gotten so that detectives are so busy they can't investigate your case if you're a victim of an attempted murder. They are too busy to investigating real murders or actual murders. If you're a victim of 100 or $400,000 bill fraud, they can't be bothered with you because they are too busy investigating frauds in the billions of dollars. Authorities and staff, plus the SEC and federal courts. The crime side includes confidence artists, top executives, bankers, savings and loan executives, management personnel, family men, thieves, burglars, addicts and those who sell to addicts, murderers, and almost every level of society, from the notables all the way down to the homeless. This brings up an extremely important issue, as we're sure the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. The time will come for you to decide whether you desire that you and your family should survive the next cataclysm. You will have to decide how to survive over the long term afterward, and if you do survive, you must pick a place to survive where survival is possible, and the most likely place being on the eastern side of a mountaintop which is accessible when the time comes. Most importantly, you'll have to find a way to protect yourself and your family through the criminally worsening precursor years and the following aftermath years. Surely you will have to have provisions, tool, lumber, supplies to which to build a storm refuge from the cataclysms, clothing, first aid, medical, books, binoculars, firewoods, a means to start a fire, and a library which can teach the young, including Seba's pharmaceutical volumes by Frank Netter, MD. Further, include my book, Natural Childbirth, Self-Taught, the only book written on the subject, and I have been teaching natural childbirth for 43 years. The preceding paragraph I started by saying the most important of all, etc. How will you protect your family against an attack when the police can't? How will you protect your wife and daughters against gang rape and murder if a marauding gang pays you a sudden visit? Those who have not prepared for the cataclysm will far outnumber those who have. Those who have not will want what you have and will kill you to get it. Both shortly before and after the cataclysm, you will be besieged by those begging you to share your provisions. The first, they will appear being nice families wanting you to share, wanting you to help, wanting you to have. Believe me, they will kill you to get it. If you look at history, let alone prehistory, when those who have no protection, the have-nots will kill the haves to get what they have. And they will destroy to get it. Are you ready to make the instantaneous decision to protect your family? A decision which will make the lives and safety of yourself and your family inexorable? If you wait to see if your visitors have evil intent so that afterward you can't take protective action and you and your family will wind up murdered, raped, and dead. And history dictates that you will be tortured just as a means for supplying your visitors with pleasure. Survival is not an easy picture to paint when you are forced to intend to protect and defend you have completely vanished. If you live at the time of the cataclysm, you will have time to prepare for it. You will have to assume attitudes and perspectives, principles and actions, and a willingness to act in a multifaceted ways you never dreamed of you would in order to survive. You will have to abide by the law until there is no law. Then survive by the rules necessary to make survival possible under all potential and onslaughts. How do you know when it is time for the cataclysm? The answer is simple. Go to a store soon where you can and purchase a top quality magnetic compass, one wherein you can lock the free north-south indicating needle in any position you desire. The bigger it is, the better off you are. Then purchase an accurate stopwatch. Take them home and put them at your bedside and have a paper under the compass with two diameters marked off at 90 degrees from each other in a larger circle than the diameters from your compass, and then put your compass on the paper centered within the circle. Unlock the compass needle and set it to north, and set the compass case so that north coincides with the compass needle, and place the paper under it fits so that one of the diameters is on the north-south line of the compass and needle and the compass case. Tape the paper in place and put the compass back so that the needle is pointed north along the north-south line on the paper underneath, and then go to bed and have a good night's sleep. In the morning, Hold the compass steadily as it is positioned in a circle beneath it. Lock the needle in place and then turn the compass to the left or right 90 degrees. Using a 90-degree line on the paper underneath as a guide, hold the case absolutely still and then release the needle. The needle will then swing north and oscillate back and forth, diminishing its swing a little each time. With the stopwatch, observe the time necessary for the compass needle to stop oscillating from the first time quite settled down in time. There will come the day, if needed, we are going to enter the galaxy's magnetic null zone as soon as the mathematics table indicates we will, that you will find settling down time increasing, as if the needle's oscillations will become sluggish. It could be that the time for settling down will stay near the same, but the number of oscillations required for the needle to settle down will decrease. So perhaps in addition to recording the stopwatch duration, also recover the number of oscillations required for the needle to settle down. Either way, you will discern your data that indeed the Earth's magnetic field strength has decreased to a critical level. Now take your family and your entire survival storage to your retreat. I hope you will not have waited this long to pack and get ready to go. Leave behind everything you can do without, and be sure to take with you whatever instruments and supplies for those instruments needed for your protection and survival. Be sure your family is well trained in their use. Damn, that's pretty crazy. Interesting. Interesting. So they give us a way of figuring out when it's going to happen based on the ticking of a watch. How interesting. There's a mathematical law that any predictions based on the extending existing data are subject to the possible fifth degree error. That means that any prediction for the time of the next cataclysm is subject to that error. Nothing can be done about it. You do not have the law. You know how that the law applies equally to the presidents and the House of Representatives and the Senate's ability to form the annual federal budget. They can't fix the budget and stick to it. The best they can do is guesstimate it. In this case of the magnetic compass, it experimentally establishes a known data point each day so that you will know within a day whenever your prediction should be. If 2000 AD passes without a cataclysm, the best thing for you to do is stick with it and maintain your vigil. When the day does come, you will be happy with the advance notice, as short or as long as it might be. It was found that the Tiwanaku populace was caught entirely off guard, with people doing what they would normally do. Everyone was caught completely surprised in an unbelievable magnitude and suddenness of the maelstrom cataclysm precipitous onslaught. Interesting. If you choose to go all out with your survival preparation, do decide to indulge in some heavy work of pouring concrete within the walls and ceiling up to 4 feet thick, with extremely heavy steel reinforcing on the eastern side of the peak of a high-top mountain. If you choose to go all out with your survivor preparation and decide to indulge in some heavy work in pouring concrete with walls and a ceiling up to 4 feet thick, and extremely heavy steel reinforcing on the eastern side of the peak of a high mountain. If you can pick 2 or 3 or 4 families who will share your survival desires with you to the extent that they will work with you in preparing the survival for the cataclysm, be assured that your families who can get along together extremely well and have good, strong teenage children who can be friends and have record-keeping capabilities to keep records of marriages, births, and deaths. Have a family trees for records also, and at least one father should be ordained non-denominationally, and be sure no one's a drinker, smoker, or narcotics user. And bear in mind that the odds of survival are mighty low. They're lower than winning the Publishers Clearinghouse's $10 million, of course. These odds include millions upon millions of persons who think the whole concept of cataclysms is a bunch of rot and don't even prepare for survival. Perhaps the best way to look at the odds of survival is to look at how many people survive out of those who actually prepare for survival. We can't even estimate for that, so who knows from past experience? It all depends on the best efforts possible in planning and preparing for the cataclysm and post-cataclysm. Structurally, energy-wise, tool-wise, medically, spiritually, travel-wise, maintenance-wise, security-wise, communication-wise, food supply-wise, and don't forget the can opener. And what to take to read is vitally important. What tools are necessary to take the ultimate of importance? If you do not survive, do remember that death is but a stepping stone. Everyone goes through its portals. Further, what a way to go. How many humans ever get to see a cataclysm? And after you go through those portals, there is peace that defies description, that passes all understanding. I wouldn't be surprised if I see you there. And further, I wouldn't be surprised if we had a nice talk. What? Wow, that's pretty interesting. So that's the first chapter of the book right here, the precursor, talking about the aftermath of what happens when the global cataclysm that happens, the one that has been marked. This is the entirely redacted version. Or these are the redacted pages from the CIA version of the book, meaning that absolutely nothing that we're going to be reading here shows up anywhere in any of the CIA's versions of this book. So we're going to keep just going through it. Oh, what? Thank you, Nicky Luchik, for subscribing to the Danger Zone. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah, VD Brown. This is actually scientifically sound or whatever, and the CIA decided to redact all of this because they didn't want you to know how you were going to die. If ever there were a controversy in the world of science, it is in the subject of evolution. The name creates angry reactions, and some scientists call it the theory of evolution. Each and every field of science, there is a strong and standard procedure known as the scientific process, and one is the procedure that is common to all sciences, wherein research is necessary to establish scientific law. These stages constitute the scientific order of utilized to establish the scientific law. Let's take a totally unrelated field in this book as an example. ESP, or extrasensory perception. For years, scientists evaded this field of research for fear of besmirching their scientific accrocions. Others took up the Krugel, expending years of effort in experimental research trying to disprove whether such a phenomenon exists, and none of them formed a hypothesis to try to lay down how it works and if it works. And all they did was formulate tests to be performed to indicate that the phenomenon did or did not exist. That is a hypothesis that does not make. Forming a hypothesis is the first step of a scientific process. I put together a hypothesis formulating on how the communication system works, utilizing the known forces of nature plus means for testing the hypothetical to determine whether it was valid. It worked in spades. It worked with everyone who I tried it on. We tried the test man, woman, child, adult, and I'm speaking of quantitative testing here, with 100% success in every case. The scientific process requires progressing from hypothesis to theory to law. Having proven my hypothesis, that meant that there now existed a valid theory concerning extrasensory perception. The next step to determine whether the theory is a law was to determine the predictability of ESP based on the testing the theory as to its predictability. This is an extremely difficult factor to test in the field of human experience because human events are not immutable. If you feel that there is an event that is going to happen to you which you do not want to happen, you can change the circumstances to prevent its happening. Then how could you prove that it would have happened if you had not changed the circumstances? If you had not changed the circumstances and it did happen, how could you prove that you knew it was going to happen? Predictability was extremely difficult to test. I won't go into the complex details, but we were able to prove predictability under controlled circumstances. That means that there definitely had been firm laws in our hands. I took the law and formulated a course that could be taught. UCLA welcomed my course into their experimental college, where I taught it to 140 students with extreme success for 4 quarters. Those 140 students were 140 new students each quarter for 4 quarters, making it 560 students I had taught. I entered this task with the haunting doubt in my mind as to whether I could teach students how to perform ESP in large groups and even in subgroups, doing their own testing with 20 groups of 7 each. I was amazed to find that there was no communication interference between groups. Each group was independently performing its own communications, and it was a further test of predictability. Even though I had serious doubts on whether it would succeed, I had previously taught ESP only on a one-on-one basis. The law was strengthened. By the way, the course was very popular with the long waiting list, as I was told by the administrator. By all scientific measurements, the theory of evolution is but rank low hypothesis based on 2 counts. Let's look at those 2 counts. The first, it is assumed that evolution of a species is a gradual process of development. If so, why do we see it as universal as a gradual degradation of species? Why does performance of the pancreas diminish on the percentage basis as the years go by? Why does diabetes has it become so prevalent in just 3 or 4 generations? Why have the intelligence lowered so remarkably? And why has the percentage of students not wanting to learn increased so markedly? Why has crime increased and empathy decreased so markedly? Is that an improvement? Why have the teeth structure deteriorated in so many places of the world? Why is it that we have few natural resistances to tooth decay? Why is it that so many people have no resistance to tooth decay? The military and scientific curiosity established a research program involving those in the military with absolute resistance to tooth decay. There were not many who were qualified to participate in the program. Why? Nobody knows. Those running the tests and analysis were never able to find out how and why those were immune. Gradual improvement of the species cannot be measured by bone structure alone, combined with assumptions. We're surrounded by gradual degradation. The second point is that nowhere do we find any analysis of evolution by mutation. Mutation is a sudden change, usually from one generation to the next, sometimes extensive changes sufficient to completely hide the preceding generation, sometimes small enough to allow reasonable analysis. And let's look about how this comes about. During the cataclysm, the turbulence surrounding our planet is sufficiently complete and disrupts the high-altitude structure which shields the Earth from the deadly cosmic rays. Very few cosmic rays normally penetrate that shield. During a cataclysm, when the shield is totally broken up, the cosmic rain gained complete access to the Earth, bombarding it in plethora. Of the very, very few who survive, some have been struck by cosmic rays and some have not, and it is impossible to determine the ratio. Georges Cuvier was the first to study fossil bones in the light of the environment which they were found. Some were found in one sedimentary strata, and some in another, and some in another, and so on and so on. He was also the discoverer of the relative structure of bones of different species. The definition of an entire skeleton was based on comparative anatomy, in which he had himself discovered and established. What a pioneer! He could have given been given a piece of bone or tooth and tell you exactly what species it belonged to. Cuvier noted that the species found in one strata deposit seemed to be totally wiped out subtly by the deposit of strata in which they were found, and in the next upper strata would contain a new species with no antecedents whatsoever. Without realizing it, he had discovered the mutations of species caused by the cataclysms, the species including humans, who have had their gonads bombarded by cosmic rays, had a genetic change wrought in the sperms or eggs that they were carrying and or in the parent cells of their gonads. Consequently, a random result occurred and their offsprings varied randomly in a degree of mutation, but nevertheless the mutation was universal in the offspring of the parents of one or both whom had their eggs or sperms bombarded by cosmic rays. Their offspring resulting from the muted parent cells, and it was totally unpredictable. If we utilize modern mathematical science to applied mathematics, it tells us that it is impossible to have upgrading species through mutation. It's equally impossible to have an even crossover in quantity from normal parents to a mutated offspring. The sure bet is that the mutational offspring represent the most sudden degradation of genes to varying random degrees. If we again use applied mathematics, that science tells us that it is utterly impossible that the human being is a result of millions and perhaps billions of years of upgrading evolution from a single cell. It has to be that a human being is a result of design and resulting production of two variations of that design, male and female. You can name any source as the creator of that design and the producer of the first models, male and female. If you were to ask me, I could tell you the exact steps were undertaken to produce the living product. I could tell you how the design was produced, both male and female, a product of sheer genius. Do you know that we are that close to being able to create a male and female ourselves? Someday I'll probably be writing and making speeches about it. On page 24 I stated, nowhere do we find any analysis of evolution of mutation. This is not exact. Anthropologists are now finding that certain species of birds are descendants of dinosaurs. If true, it is a startling revelation of the veracity of mutational descendants upon the relationship could not have been through gradual evolution, but by upgrading it, which is impossible, or downgrading. Proof that man and women are the closest that we have to the original design after thousands of years of cataclysms and mutations through his abstract functions, plus a few concrete functions, speech and the capability of learning and maintaining expensive vocabularies, are good examples of concrete functions. Abstract functions including three-dimensional visualization, inductive reasoning, deductive reasoning, and analytical reasoning, and of course we must include empathy. Even some species of human are totally lacking empathy. In any case, humans have the unique and most complete brains other than any other species. Remember that, especially in the years preceding and following the cataclysm, those without empathy turned criminal first. If there is any doubt in your mind about that, just read the newspapers, watch TV news, watch TV crime documentary programs, and think it over. And then draw your own conclusions. Damn. Well, that's pretty dope right there. So we're digging into this Adam and Eve book. So we got the first redacted portion of things going through. Time to do some chat shoutouts. So we say, what's up, Doc Rocks? What's up, Jethro? What's up, Toos? What's up, JR Riggs? What's up, Sherry CBD? What's up, DRH Bo? Damn. So, like, what do we say? I don't know. I was just reading through the chat and saying, what up, D? What's up, Hoser the Guy? What's up, Sewer Guy? What's up, Yo Drock? What's up, Motive? What's up, DRH Bones? Crystal Luna? So we're getting into the story a bit here. And the story seems strange. I mean, that's not what I expected to be reading in the first couple pages. Him talking about, oh, so just before the cataclysm happens, the magnetic field lowers, and usually the magnetic field lowering is prefaced by a increasing in the human resonance, and then when the human resonance falls below 7, and then even lower, that's when we're going to really, really have a problem. And I guess what they're saying right now is that people are going to get crazy. You know, they talk about in the end of days, before the cataclysms start, people are going to get really, really crazy. And I mean, you could look at what's happening in the world today and see that maybe, just maybe it is. I mean, people are getting nuts, folks. People are getting nuts, folks. It's very scary. People are mad crazy right now. QAnon people are super crazy. And there's a lot of people that lack empathy out there. The next chapter is Jesus as history. There are 3 passages in the Bible which concern us from the viewpoint of history alone. They are the New Testament: 1, Matthew 27:34 through 45 through 50. Number 2, Mark 15:33 through 37. 3, John 19:28 through 30. Number 1, they gave him vinegar to drink mingled with gall, and when he had tasted thereof, he would not drink. Now from the 6th hour there was darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani? That is to say, my God, why thou have forsaken me? Some of them that stood there when they heard that said, This man calleth for Elias. And straightway one of them ran and took a sponge and filled it with vinegar and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. And then they said, Let us see whether Elias will come to save him. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And when the 6th hour was come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And then in the 9th hour Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani? Which is being interpreted, my God, why thou hast forsaken me? And behold, some of them, as they stood by when they heard it, said, Behold, he calleth Elias. And one ran and filled a sponge with vinegar, and put it on a reed, saying, Let alone, let us see whether Elias comes to take him down. And Jesus cried with a loud voice, and gave up the ghost. And after this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, that the scripture might be fulfilled, he saith, I thirst. Now there was a set vessel full of vinegar, and they filled the sponge with vinegar, and put it upon the hyssop, and put it into his mouth. And when Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, It is finished, and bowed his head, and gave up the ghost. Luke had a totally different view of the sequence of events. He didn't even record whether Jesus had said he was thirsty, as John did. He didn't record the words of Jesus spoke, as Matthew and Mark did. Starting with the verse where he did agree with the others, let's look at Luke 24:44 through 46. And it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness all over the earth until the 9th hour. And the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was rent in the midst. And when Jesus cried with a loud voice, he said, Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit. And having said thus, he gave up the ghost. You can see that Luke omitted the scene where Jesus spoke the words Matthew and Mark quoted and interpreted, and which many of the crowd thought Jesus were saying he was thirsty, as of which Jordan said there's so little of it, as he merely quoted Jesus as saying, I thirst. Luke also admitted the action after Jesus' strange words of someone thinking Jesus was putting vinegar on a sponge and then putting the sponge on a reed and then giving the vinegar to Jesus. Matthew, Mark, and John related his sponge and vinegar scene, while Luke omitted it completely. It would seem that we should pass Luke as a credible witness. Now let's discuss the words that Jesus spoke so vividly described by Mark and Matthew. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, and Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Both Matthew and Mark put a question mark after their quote of Jesus' words. When Jesus spoke to them, he created quite a bit of confusion. Some said, "Hey, he's calling Elias, maybe he'll come and save them." Or others said that he was thirsty. Jesus said, "I thirst." Someone in the crowd, thinking Jesus had said he was thirsty, soaked a sponge in vinegar and put it on a reed and held it up to Jesus' mouth. We must give some eminent credit to Matthew and Mark for writing down as best they could the sounds of the words that Jesus spoke. From what they wrote, we know that no such words existed in Hebrew at the time, nor did they exist in the Aramaic, nor in Greek, nor in any other language found in the area at that time. Why did Jesus, in his dying moments, use a language that no one else knew? The best Matthew and Mark could do was say it was being interpreted, that is to say, that thank God for their honesty, because they had no idea. As for the difference between Matthew's Eli, Eli, and Mark's Eloi, Eloi, we must be considered that the crowd's reaction. The only reaction quotes in both Matthew and Mark as Jesus is saying Elias, and if we were reduced to a choice, we would have to go along with Eli, Eli. I searched and searched, but I could not find any words in any language. In desperation, I turned to the parent language, prehistoric Mayan or Naga. Here are the words as large as life. Helai, Helai, lamat sabachthani. I am fainting, I am fainting. Darkness is coming over me. Since Jesus is quoting as having said, cried with a loud voice, in both Matthew and Mark's, perhaps we should quote the translation as being, I'm fainting, I am fainting. Darkness is coming over me. This opens up a bucket full of questions and controversies. Imagine what I was faced with as soon as I found the translation. I was faced with the mountain to climb, and if I didn't climb it, I would have never slept again. And I knew that, like solving the puzzles of cataclysmology, the problem would never leave me alone, mainly for the sake of my own dear wife's curiosity. Whoa. Interesting. So, Jesus in the Bible was mistranslated as speaking an ancient dead language that nobody's ever heard of, referred to as prehistoric Mayan or Naga. And I'd just like to cut over to something else over here real quick. We actually have seen a representation of this prehistoric of a prehistoric language. Our friends Tangri137 actually had just released something called Vumare, right? Which was a picture to a new piece of whatever the fuck it was. Nobody really knows what the heck this thing is, but it's obviously pretty interesting. And it utilizes a language that hasn't really been seen. Although it does have some characters that are associated to the Greek languages, and Tangri's own admission from a question that I asked them that this isn't a current language that is known to our planet, and probably has a bigger similarity to another language that the author here was actually looking into, meaning the Naga language. And as we know, with prehistoric Mayan or Naga, we only have very, very small indications of what the actual text was, and it's possibly one of the hardest things to find out there. And the main funny thing here would be is what are the odds that the language of Vumare that is actually being spoken by Tengri in their new puzzle is actually the same thing for this prehistoric Mayan or Naga that our friend Mr. Chan Thomas is talking about. Furthermore, wouldn't it be interesting if the artifacts that I already have, the ones with all the aliens and stuff on them, are actually what you would call Naga artifacts? Well, actually, that's what they are. They're Naga artifacts. They come from the history and time before Mayan, meaning that they're from a time before the cataclysm, which gives rise to the reason that they were allowed to be ossified in such a way, and also gives us the understanding as to why there's blood all over them. They call it blood jade because when the cataclysm happened and all these people were standing and just chilling and doing all their stuff, when the water and wind started ripping them to shreds, all of the blood and everything covered everything that was out there. So all of the little trinkets and stones and knickknacks and things that they would wear, like gold, silver, or whatever, were imbued with the actual blood of the individuals that came before them, and then preserved and ossified under mud and ice for over 7,000 years, so that when they were returned to actual, the world about a couple hundred, no, not even a couple hundred years, about 10 years ago, when they were actually returned to individuals such as myself and other people that actually know Mayan elders, they were said, yes, this is blood jade, it contains the blood of your forefathers. In literal translation of that means that, yeah, so when they were just standing there and they all died or whatever, yeah, all the blood and guts that were flying all over the place because of all the wind that was going at supersonic and speeds, just basically ripping them to shreds, got their blood all over all that shit. And then basically the only way to make blood jade is for the jade to be left alone for a couple thousand years in a nice cool place with a little bit of air so that the blood can slowly oxidize and leave its imprintation upon the stone. Because remember, most people think that jade is mostly green. Well, the real good jade, it's got all the speckles and stuff on it, because it literally is the blood of your ancestors. Yeah. So that's what I'm kind of going with the whole Tengri thing, is that I think the Tengri language is actually a prehistoric Naga or Mayan language, and good fucking luck finding that shit. Good luck finding that shit. Hila hila lambat sabaktina. I am fainting. I am fainting. Darkness is coming over me. Darkness falls across the land. Midnight hour is close at hand. Creatures crawl in search of blood. Right? 100 questions crossed my mind. Well, maybe not 100, but a plethora of them anyway. A plethora of them anyway. Why did Jesus in his dying moments speak a language that no one whom we know have heard him spoke before? Was he naturally reverted to a language that he had spoken in his prime years in earlier years? Or such as a prime language in the early years? If so, where had he been? Where could he have been to have picked up that language and used it habitually? Let's look again at the Bible as history. A good place to start is Luke 2:41, where Jesus' parents are mentioned. Number 41. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days as they were returned, child Jesus tarried up behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother knew not of it. They, supposing him to have been in the company, went on a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinfolk and acquaintance. And when they found him not, they turned back to Jerusalem seeking him. And it came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of both the doctors, both hearing him and asking questions. And all that heard him were astonished with his understanding and answers. And they said to him, they were amazed, and his mother said to him, Son, why hast thou thus been dealing with us? Behold, thy father and I have been sought thee sorrowing. And he said to them, How is it that ye sought me? Wist ye that I must be about my Father's business? This one story tells us that Jesus had to be a genius of his day. Also, it tells us that he had an affinity for dropping in the temple to share minds with the adult intelligista on an equal plane. One or more facts should be taken into account, and the summation of contributing factors is that there is a total of only 55 days of Jesus' life accounted for in the Bible. We are left with him at the age 12 in the incident above, and then brought back into his life when he is about 30 in Luke 3:23. This leaves us with about 18 years of Jesus' life unaccounted for in the Bible. Is there any other source of his travel? In the mid-1800s, the British Army was stationed in the northern of India near the town of Arodhya, a prehistorically known as Ajudhya. They discovered that there was a temple there which there were only 3 of the kind in India. The pre-Brahmin India, all the temples of this kind were called the Nikal temples. The official language of these temples, the British found out, was Naga or prehistoric Mayan. Curiosity enough, there was a tribe in this extreme north of India called the Naga tribe. This tribe even today speaks pure Naga as their everyday language. They told the British of Jesus having been there, and as a late teenager young adult who attended the Nikal temple as a student and graduated the temple. He was especially remembered through tradition because he was a genius. Students were taught rigorous courses from mathematics to medicine, languages, what we would call ESP, out-of-body travel, metaphysics, science, and natural healing. The course was so rigorous that it usually took a lifetime for a normal person to graduate from the temple. Students had to learn Naga. Graduates were called the Son of God, and it's interesting that Jesus never referred to himself as the Son of God, but always the Son of Man. Naga's tales of Jesus include Jesus becoming a student as a young man, and through his genius he went through the courses in record time as a student, a master and graduate at the age of 25 to 30 years old. On investigating, I found out that there was a common place between the Holy Land and India in Jesus' time. They would have made the trip there very easily at 15 to 20 and back just as easily 10 to 15 years later. There are also informed of Jesus' proclivity for dropping into temples just to have intellectual and spiritual discourse with the adult intelligista. Imagine his going to India, happening into a Nakal temple, dropping in for some disclosure, and afterwards deciding that there was a place for him to stay and really learn. Spending 10 to 15 years learning to speak and write Naga, speaking it as his sole language for that duration, certainly would have accounted for his reverting it to on the cross as his natural language. There's another point in question which has to do with the doctrine taught at the temple. The entire philosophy of the religion Jesus taught is exactly as he learned it at the temple. Never would he have entertained the thought that God would or might forsake him under any circumstances whatsoever, on or off the cross or anywhere. Only humans would. At this point, we should summarize everything that we could say about the events surrounding the moments when Jesus spoke those words on the cross and apply whatever reasoning we can in order to cover every aspect involved towards either verifying or refuting translation of his words. First, our only reasonable source of his words that Jesus actually spoke is through Mark and Matthew. The second is abundantly clear that Jesus spoke in a loud voice. There is a difference between listening to sounds and hearing them. Mark and Matthew listened to him to the extent that they were able to write down the phonetics of what Jesus said to the best of their ability. We should recognize that the attention to the detail of this phonetics was enhanced by the loudness in which Jesus spoke. John didn't pay much attention to detail. He just heard Jesus speak loudly and assumes that Jesus said merrily, "I thirst," without attempting to listen or write down the phonetics of the words Jesus spoke. Third, the only primary source of meaning to those words through Matthew, Mark, and John. Matthew said, that is to say, Mark said, which is being interpreted, and John said, Jesus saith, "I thirst." It is clear that Matthew and Mark were not translating, but giving us their best guess at what the words Jesus might have spoke meant. John just guessed outright. The most interesting aspects of Matthew and Mark's recordings in the phonetics of Jesus' words and their meaning are so nearly alike, with one symbol, li, as recorded by Matthew, and loi as recorded by Mark. The only difference being, it appears, each had his own memory, referred to by those in the field of aptitudinal study as total memory, of the sounds of the symbols, suggesting independent recording of the phonetics by each of them. However, their interpretations of the meaning of Jesus' words are precisely the same, suggesting that they conferred with each other, comparing their interpretations and arriving at a mutually agreed upon interpretation of what Jesus meant by when he spoke loudly. Certainly neither of them compared their memories with Luke or John. It appears that we must honor Matthew and Mark's accuracy in recording the sounds of the words as Jesus spoke. It's plausible, since Jesus spoke so loudly. Fourth, we have no secondary source of the words Jesus spoke. We only have secondary sources through Matthew, Mark, and John, who tell us about the crowd and the scene and the reaction and what they thought Jesus said. And some crowd said, hey, he's calling Elias. Maybe he'll come down and get him off the cross. And if that was a big joke, some others said, he's thirsty. Someone give him a drink. So someone ran to a bowl of vinegar because, everybody loves drinking vinegar, and put a sponge on it, soaked it in vinegar, and held it up to Jesus' lips so that he could drink vinegar. Talk about adding insult to injury. And, of course, John added his bit by writing, Jesus saith, "I thirst." It's obvious that there was a great amount of confusion resulting from Jesus' words with the three known interpretations of his words, and isn't it interesting that the proactive in those versions differed from each other in the extent that absolutely no comparison between them. Fifth, it is fact that Jesus' words did not exist in any known language at that time, including Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. Eli is expressly not part of the Hebrew tongue, including the book of Eli. And it was entered into that language since then to mean "my God." It seems strange that those who fostered and shouted for his crucifixion would be the ones to adopt one of his words Jesus spoke on the cross into their language. Contra to one of the popular myths, Jesus was not nailed to the cross through his hands and spaces through his bones and his lower feet leading to his toes. It was a common form of execution at that time, and always the nails were driven through the space in the wrist bones as they were driven. If they were driven through the hands, the crucified would pull his hands off the nails easily while on the cross. The same condition existed on the feet of the crucified. In order to keep them from pulling their feet off the nails, or nails had to be driven through the space between the upper foot bones. Therefore, the crucified became a literal prisoner of the cross, and the only way to get him off the cross was to pull off the nails. The crucified was nailed onto the cross in such a way as that the knees were bent somewhat so they could hang by the arms and rest on his legs. After a while, his diaphragm would enter the early stages of paralysis, and he would feel suffocation oncoming. And then he would straighten up his legs, standing on the nailed feet, providing relief for his arms and bearing the stress holding up his body, thereby relieving the stress on his diaphragm, leading to paralysis and suffocation. Consequently, he endured running a continuum of up and down, up and down, and up and down for hours and hours and hours. The responsibility for performing the crucifixion had a way of stopping this endurance test. They simply broke the legs of the crucified so that he couldn't stand on them anymore. Crucifixion, that's what they called it. And he forced him to hang by his arm without cease until he fell into full paralysis of his diaphragm and died of suffocation. It is known that Jesus suffered scourging for some time before his walk to the crucifixion with Simon of Cyrene, who was compelled by the soldiers to carry his cross. Scourging means the torture with whips, with barbs at the ends and lashes of each whip. Those barbs ate deeply through Jesus' skin into his flesh. It had to be excruciatingly painful. And while on his walk to Golgotha, Jesus was still sufficiently conscious to have made the walk successfully, and he had not entered a state of deep shock. There were 3 men crucified at the same time on Golgotha. Jesus was, of course, in the middle. The other 2 had not been tortured before their crucifixion. After they were on their crosses, Jesus entered into a deep shock, in what condition it was impossible for him to feel any pain. And while in that condition, he lost consciousness. And while entering that state, he said loudly, as quoted by Matthew, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. It has been popularly assumed that pain drove Jesus to say those words. Impossible. He was feeling no pain. He was in deep shock, on the verge of passing out. It's almost logical that he was saying, I'm fainting, I'm fainting. Darkness is coming over me. It is most illogical that Jesus would have been complaining in a loud voice that God had forsaken him. As I said before, he absolutely knew that only humans would ever do something like that. This is an appropriate time to consider the Shroud of Turin. The image on or in shows the barb gouges of the whipping, scourging, plus shows the legs of the victims were not broken, as Jesus's were not. Further, the image shows irrefutable signs that the victim had been crowned with the crown of thorns, just as Jesus had been. Further still, the image shows irrefutable signs of the victim having been crucified in the same manner. Those parts of the images, the proof of the barbed whippings, the scourgings, the proof of the victim being crucified, the unbroken legs, and the most unusual, which is most unusual in a crucifixion, and the crown of thorns worn by the victim, all point to Jesus being the wearer of that controversial shroud. The crown of thorns is the most powerful indication that Jesus being the wearer. Who else but Jesus would have been crowned as a part of their scourging, the scourging itself being almost never employed, and when crowned for whatever reason, in Jesus' case, for the diversion as the King of the Jews. There is a last subject to consider, is how the image was made on the Shroud of Turin. This is a point of great controversy among scientists. How is it accomplished is known only to those of us who have found the nature that makes gravity, or how nature makes gravity. Whoa. Damn, this shit's getting freaking deep, done. We're getting deep, son. So we just went back through the entirety of this one, and we're hearing somebody talk about this Jesus thing, talking about building arcs and learning how to surf, but we're finally finding a little bit of information on some of the words that he says. The most popular thing that most people know is, God, why do you forsake me, God? And if you were the Son of Man, it kind of seems to be strange for you to be screaming out to your dad, hey man, why are you forsaking me? But the ridiculousness here is that the one person that has studied the Naga language into its entirety actually understood that Jesus was speaking another language, and that gives us a lot of understanding as to what that dude was up to when he was out there, right? The Last Temptation of Christ, a pre-Sumerian language, the Ka language.
Nakal. Augustine's. The first term of Nakal is contained in Augustine's the Prodonza's works, Queen Mu and the Egyptian Sphinx. Perhaps we felt to be necessary the recovering libraries of the Mayan sages hidden about the beginning of the Christian era to save them from the destruction at the hands of the devastating hordes that had invaded their country in those times, and to learn their contents of wisdom of those ancient philosophers, which were presented in the books of the Brahmins, but a reflection. That wisdom was no doubt brought to India, from there carried to Babylon and Egypt in very remote ages by those Mayan adepts, the Nakals, aka the Exalted, who, starting from the land of their birth as missionaries of religion and civilization, went to Burma, where they become known as Nagas and established themselves in the Deccan, whence they carried their civilian work all over the earth. Nakal. Nakal language shows up in H.P. Lovecraft's books, shows up in animes, shows up in all kinds of places. Deccan Plateau in the Himalayas, southern India, northern India, the Naga people, ethnic groups in northwest Myanmar, tribes with similar cultural identities. Interesting. The Naga, the Nakal. What a strange day. Very interesting. Now let's get to angels and UFOs. Now we have come to the dispugnant subject. If you stick your toe in the water, it either gets burned or frozen. It could create controversy in a millisecond or maybe even a microsecond. One aspect I have a distinct advantage for is I know how nature makes gravity. Once we understand the process for us to produce man-made gravity is to duplicate the processes of nature's gravity in a controlled fashion. Once we understand this, we can expand our understanding to include propulsion, communication, and weaponry. Any nation, large or small, which finds this process will have the world at its mercy. Any nation which discovers how to use it for any one of the three purposes automatically has the other two. Any nation, even the smallest, having all three processes, will control our planet with unchallengeable invincibility. We can understand that just about every UFO sighting and experience and why small UFOs are built as they are and why large UFOs are easier to design and construct from the considerations of the power plant. Of course, a 55-mile-long mothership would be more difficult to manufacture if we consider the structural requirements. I have seen several of these behemoths along with many other persons, and I have seen the smaller, discus-like vehicles. Note that the common cross-sections of these vehicles, behemoth and small, is just one cross-section circular. The fuck? Is this dude talking about aliens? Now we have another factor. What is an angel? And further, who is an angel? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote about angels that they were normal and accepted them as part of their times. It started when Mary Magdalene, the mother of James and Solomon, decided to go to the sepulchre where Jesus was buried. There they found the blocking stone removed and Jesus gone. They found one or two men there. Matthew was saying he was an angel whose countenance was like lightning and his raiment white as snow. And Mark said, the entering into the sepulchre, they saw the young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment. Not once did Mark mention that there was an angel there. Luke said, and it came to pass, as they, presumably the three women, were much perplexed thereabout, behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. But John said, but Mary stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and seeth the two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. There was an entertaining game which sometimes is played at parties. Everyone sits in chairs in a circle, and the first one on the end is given a short message in a writing. Each person relays the message verbally, whispering the message to the next person's ear until the last person in the circle receives it and writes it down. Invariably, the two messages bear little resemblance to each other, but if we go through the circle, each one telling what message he received, we find that the message deteriorated time at which is relayed. Sometimes one step in the relayed circle changes the whole meaning of the message. Try it sometime when you're at a party. It's very fun and revealing. The strange thing is that mathematics of communication theory and exact science predicts deterioration in the relaying intelligent information. The more links in the relay, the more deterioration. The worst series of links is to have all links human. Like a ring of chairs, one person per chair, the more the person, the more ridiculous the deterioration. Now none of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were at the sepulchre, so what they wrote was not the first-hand information. Even if each one of them had spoken to the same woman, of the three of them who went to the sepulchre, her story could or would have been different each time she told it to one of the four. Or, if each woman told the story to a different disciple, the story most definitely would have varied. Further, none of them told the disciples of the story, but the disciples were told the story by a mix of secondary sources. It would have greatly varied. The fact is we don't know how Matthew, Mark, John, or Luke got the sepulchre story. That can't be changed. In spite of all the differences between the four relating of the same story, we have to take into account each version, nothing more than just what we see where we stand. Matthew stated, one angel, like countenance, like lightning, radiant white as snow. The angel spoke to the woman, and all had feared the angel. Mark stated, one young man seated on the right side, clothed in a white garment, and three women were affrighted. He spoke to the woman. Luke said, two men in shining garments were standing by the woman, and the women were afraid. Both spoke to the woman, saying the same words. John said, Mary Magdalene stood outside the sepulchre, stooping and looking in, and she saw two angels in white sitting where one had the head and one had the feet, and where Jesus had lain. They conversed with her. No fear was mentioned. She saw Jesus and did not recognize him. She thought he was the gardener. John's relation varies so much that from the other it suggests that a different event. It appears that she visited the sepulchre with the other woman, then ran back, encountered Peter, told him about the stone which was taken from the sepulchre. The two of them ran back to the sepulchre to start the story. So we can conclude from these four stories is that the angels look like men. In fact, they must have been men. And whether they were one or two of them, he or they wore long, bright, clean, white, glistening robes. And although strangers, they could speak Hebrew and spoke calmly and authoritatively to the women. Whether there were one or two of them doesn't matter, except that they had countenance which caused fear in the women, except for in the story related to John. It would be that Mary Magdalene, in her first visit to the sepulchre with the other two women, had visited with the man or men at the time who had dispelled the woman's fears about his or their words, so when she returned she had no fear. What about these men? They were not known anywhere. They were dressed totally different than anyone in the area, or even far away from that area, and they showed absolutely no fear with anything or anyone, and Matthew stated that the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and rolled back the stone from the door of the sepulchre. I'll bet a pound of earth that he was just waiting at the sepulchre for those who crucified Jesus to show up, hence his countenance was like lightning. I bet he was just waiting for those guys. I bet he's just waiting for those guys. It looks as that we must conclude that the men and these angels came to Earth in their space vehicle to take care of the aftermath of Jesus' crucifixion. Let's say that their space vehicle was Ezekiel's wheel. And any dissenter's only alternative is basically name calling, because this is what we've seen. So Why would these men, these angels, watch over Jesus? The only answer is in the legend, in that they watched over him because he was a genius, a man who graduated from the Nikal Temple in so short of a time that he could spend his life taking and learning his learnings of true faith from the temple and turn them into the teachings and taking them around to the rest of the world. These people from other worlds never come here to live because the planet is a garbage dump of the universe. We murder, rape, steal, wage war, killing millions upon millions. There are millions of young girls and women in the Eastern Hemisphere sexually mutilated to prevent them from having sexual intercourse before marriage. There is forced prostitution by kidnapping child females and being sold into marriage and then sold into prostitution out of slavery, or in and out of slavery. Greed beyond comparison, wanton destruction of our planet by pollution and greed, unbridled reproduction without responsibility, and the spread of death-dealing disease and irresponsible action of all the deeds being perpetrated as commonly as you and I sprinkle salt on food. On top of this, we have a worldwide addiction to narcotics and narcotic selling and boozing. Uh-oh. We have a wife-beating, girlfriend-beating, child-beating, and murderer on an unprecedented scale in our country. So prevalent in other countries that it is a matter of normalcy. Rape is so common all over the world that if we were to stop it, knowing where and how to stop it would be as difficult as knowing where and how to stop narcotics abuse and selling, which the world has firmly by the tail now. Governments have been deteriorated to the point where the whole planet is near anarchy, and some governments are on the brink of wipeout from losses due to AIDS or other types of diseases. Let us just look at our government and the federal government of the USA. Do you know that every government official who approves the federal budget violates his law to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America? Consequently, each one who approves the federal budget every year is subject to impeachment. Why is each one approving the federal budget not impeached? Because there are too many of them, probably. Why should each one approving the budget be impeached? Well, let's see. Our government is in business. In fact, over 4,000 businesses. Each and every one of them loses money every year. They make up their losses every year by asking legislature to appropriate funds to cover their losses. The legislature appropriates these funds. How our government ever got into over 4,000 businesses to begin with is a question for historians to answer. I won't attempt to analyze it here. The point is that we are in these businesses. How legal is it for our government to be in any business, and what can it be done about it? It has always been the axiom of constitutional law that if it's not in the Constitution, the government can't do it. Perhaps you remember the occasion during the last months of Reagan's administration. He was invited to an assembly of seniors of 3 high schools in Florida to address them. One of those was Parkland, by the way. Let's see. In the question and answer period afterward, the valedictorian of each class was allowed to ask a question. When the last one, a girl, rose to ask her question, the president was being rushed off stage by sides. He told her to go ahead with the question. While he was walking to the side and rear of the stage, he asked, What can Congress do? The president, reaching the right rear of the corner of the stage with his arms upraised, shouted back, If it's not in the Constitution, then they can't do it. And he was gone. In law, he was right. In practice, he was dead wrong. The Congress and the President have been violating that point of law for over 80 years. If anyone is in breach, or if anyone in a branch of the U.S. government
grants approval of funds for any business which the government is engaged in, he or she is approving the government's participation in an unconstitutional activity which is not authorized by the Constitution of the United States of America, and therefore breaking his or her oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The same goes for any executive, president included, who signs appropriation of funds or disperses them. That's every single president. Trump, Obama, Clinton, every single one. All of them. Do you know how much annual tax on the Treasury by those government business losses cost us? The total of all personal income taxes, estate taxes, and gifts taxes. And those businesses, all of them, pay no taxes and pay no rent. Further, in the history of estate taxes and gift taxes, our government has never netted a dime. They spend all they collect collecting it. Congress has to borrow it for that part of the business losses to make up for the non-netting estate and gift taxes. The IRS has an estate tax audit rate of 105 to 110% annually. Why can't they trust themselves? Our government lies to a citizenry as a policy. Consider how much they have lied to the U.S. about the MIAs in Vietnam. When Congress and the President passed the excise tax during World War II, they promised that the law was merely to raise wartime funds and that the tax would be repealed right after the war. They lied. Take the case of the Native Americans in the southeastern United States who had their land confiscated by the federal government during World War II. These Americans were promised that their land was taken for wartime use only and it would be returned to them as soon as it was over. To this day, the land has never been returned to the rightful owners, and the government lied as usual. Take the case of Bill Benson. He checked in person the archives of every state in the nation, plus the National Archives, and discovered the 16th Amendment had never passed. It is the law that never existed. It's an illegal amendment to our Constitution. As a result, Benson did not pay taxes. He was arrested, brought to court. His attorneys were made to submit more than 80 briefs, one right after the other, in an obvious attempt to draw out the case. The judge made Benson perform his archival researches again, but this time using procedures ordered by the court. Benson did so again, adhering to those procedures precisely. The results came out the same, so he proved under court-ordered procedure that the law, the 16th Amendment of the Constitution, never passed, and it's illegally being enforced. The government lied again. Nevertheless, the court found him guilty and sentenced Benson to prison. He was on medicinal schedule with life-preserving medicine. The prison changed that and reduced him to practically a vegetable. Our federal government is now starting to pass into existence laws that equivalent to the Roman Catholic state laws of the 7th centuries of the Inquisition concerning property confiscation, both real and personal, also arrest, accusation, trial, and conviction. Doesn't that sound fucking great to you? It kind of makes you really weird when you hear all these QAnon people be all like, yeah, lock them up, put them in jail, no due process. Fucking idiots. Our legislative and executive branches have passed a law that makes the arrest of property legal. Innocent persons are being arrested without warrant. Their property is arrested without warrant and without evidence or proof of guilt. Their bank accounts, homes, cars, personal property are arrested or stolen. How does a house or a bank account or a car or a doll or bicycle or tricycle defend itself? How on earth does the victim defend himself when all of his estate is confiscated? If he proves himself innocent, unbelievably, he is allowed to buy back his property. But with what? No bank account, no property, cash, credit, or business? Will someone please convince me that our government has not deteriorated even if they repeal or modify this law they passed to start with? What's next? The sovereignty of our nation is vanishing, and a citizen of another country can walk the streets of our country and arrest anyone he hears saying anything that he doesn't like. Meaning, you can get a representative like Ilhan Omar saying that, oh, Muslims are the kings, and you know what? You spoke out against Muslim views, and you should be arrested. That sort of thing. President Lincoln predicted that our nation would die from action within, not without. How right he was. Now we are being made to pay for the criminality of our government allowed for years by the S&L and bank officers, executives and owners amounting to billions upon billions of dollars. All they can think about is raise taxes when they could accomplish more by cleaning up our government's house, by making our government constitutional, by adopting into action the recommendations of the Grace Commission and the Hoover Commission, and by passing the Liberty Amendment. It's impossible to expect that legislators and executives to change their course to that extent. They are too far down the trail, leaning on destructive habits that they are used to. The Constitution specifically states that Congress has the power and authority to coin money and regulate the value thereof. Nowhere in the Constitution is the right to delegate that authority and responsibility granted under any circumstances whatsoever. Congress unconstitutionally delegated that authority and responsibility to the private bank known as the Federal Reserve System. And it is costing our nation its economic lifeblood in interest. There is a terrible conflict of interest here. The bank wants the national debt to increase because it earns more interest. Deterioration of our government is achieved by the people in approaching the next cataclysm by bringing down their nation, just like the mice in the extremely low-density magnetic field environment experiment. The mice experiment, we can see universal forcible rape around the clock and cannibalism as the ultimate signs of criminality during the low magnetic density field environment. In humans, we can see the different refinements of this degree of criminality. Remember, those without empathies turn criminal first. Greed is the most common denominator contributing to the criminal behavior. Rape and beating and murder follow closely. Behind all of the billions of financial institutions, debacle is the greed that is causing the disaster. Common to all criminals, disaster is the criminal's mental state that they will get away with their crimes, that no one will ever know. That is common to just about every criminal's mind. When those in power in the financial world are touched with this thought, combined with their lack of empathy, they have entered into a world of crime. They might as well stand alongside the rapists, the beaters, the thieves, the robbers, the murderers, and be counted. They're all non-empathetic, leveling criminally with the lowering magnetic field density of our planet as it approaches to the next cataclysm. This is not an apology for their criminality. It is a damnation of welcoming one into the self of adulthood of no empathy. And the consequences are explicit. We are responsible for our own acts as we are responsible for our own empathy. This page is the icing on the cake. The Constitution of the United States of America states bluntly in Article 4, Section 4, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a republic form of government that shall protect each of them against invasion, and on the application of legislature or of the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. The only process through which this guarantee made in the supreme law of our nation can be kept is through the United States government, the president and legislature. Note that the italicized provision does not specify armed invasion and includes any and all kinds of invasions. States of our nations have been invited by some 6 million illegal immigrants, plus 3 million more this year. Total cost to taxpayers was $35 billion. Why has our government not honored its responsibility constitutionally assigned to it? Why are U.S. citizens losing their country to illegal aliens? Abraham Lincoln said in 1838. If the USA's destruction be our lot, we must be ourselves its author and finisher. And as the nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. Woo. Deep. Interesting. Did you know that the 16th Amendment was never actually officially ratified? I didn't know that. Remember that this book was pasted in, 16th Amendment. Oh, what does the 16th Amendment do? Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes and incomes from whatever source derived without appropriate to several among states without regard to census or enumeration. Oh, that's what it is? 16th Amendment, Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without appropriate among several states without any regard to any census or enumeration. Yeah, the 16th Amendment never actually got passed, folks. That's a complete fabrication and lie, and it doesn't matter. It was proven in court, and they still put the guy into jail for it because they were like, well, we know we didn't pass it, but everybody believes that's a law, so we're going to throw you in jail anyway. So, kind of funny when you hear the Freeman argument. The Freeman argument actually is born from the Cataclysm thing, as is the Prepper movement and everything else. If you've ever watched Marfugal TV, you've probably understood what a prepper is, and the prepping movement has always come from the next cataclysm type idea. Although most of the preppers are prepping because they've seen the CIA documents and they believe that something's going to come. Most people haven't actually dove into any of this stuff here, and if you're wondering why all this stuff has been redacted by the CIA, I think just the sheer fact of me speaking all of it to you gave you the understanding that you need to. Really, this isn't anywhere that we weren't being. This was written in 1993. 1993. So we're talking about illegal immigration in 1993 costing us $35 billion and our people not doing anything about it. And here we are trying to make America great again, but we still haven't built a wall. We still haven't fixed our healthcare system, and we're thundering ever far forward to war. Yeah. I think Mr. Chan really gave us some food for thought here on this one. I'm going to read Jesus and Cataclysms just because it's a short spot in the little guy right here. And then I think we'll call it Jesus and Cataclysms. Now we come to the subject of Jesus and Cataclysms. Matthew and Mark are the only places in the Bible where Jesus was quoted as discussing the subject. Let's look at Matthew 43:35-39. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away. But the day and hour knoweth no man, and not the angel of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the days of the Son of Man be. And for the days until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Jesus follows with examples and parables, exhorting his listeners to be prepared for the next flood. In 24:42, he says, "Watch therefore, for ye know what honor your Lord doth come." The parables include the famous one about the 10 virgins and 5 wise people and 5 foolish, and he again was exhorting his listeners to be prepared. How many times can the scripture have been read from us in a pulpit without reference to Jesus' warning of the forthcoming inundation of cataclysm? Mark offers a different version of the same discourse Jesus gave to one of his disciples. Here's one of the excerpts. "But when ye shall see the abomination, desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet standing where it ought not, let him readeth understand. Let them that be in Judea flee to the mountain. But woe to them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days, and pray ye that your flight not be in the winter. Pray your flight not be in the winter. And the stars of heaven shall fall, and the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken. And then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the uttermost parts of the earth, and the uttermost parts of heaven. Bear this verse in mind when you read the postlude. We're getting pretty close to the end, I think. Yeah, we are close to the end. We might as well just read it to the end. Afterthoughts. I was debating myself for many years about 2 items to include in your survival equipment. These items are not necessary for survival, but are a great advantage to post-survival knowledge. If you do survive, how do you know where you are? Where is the shell there is crazy rotation taking you? Or shall we say deposited you? And if you lay claim to any land, how do you record it? That means, how do you record it accurately? First of all, take a course in navigation. Purchase the book for yourself, Nathaniel Bowdit's Tables. Also, buy yourself the best sextant you can find. Take care of it as if it were your life's treasure. Learn how to use it and become an expert. It can tell you your location. Learn your constellations of the stars, as they will not change, only their location will. Take the sundial with you, if you can, and take a globe with you, and a 1/16 or 1/18 wide colored tape, for you will be able to tape on your new equator. For tools, take long and short levels. Take a good stopwatch with you. Your days may be longer or shorter than 24 hours. And take a course in surveying and become an expert, or have someone with you take this responsibility. And purchase the best transit, tripod, surveyor's rod, and surveyor's steel tape. And if you want to record any property you may want to claim, you'll need them. If you can't do all that, at least do paragraphs 1 and 2. Good luck. Postlude. This is about a legend I've struggled with writing the shortest of pieces as to where to put it, and finally was forced into this location for lack of a better place. This is not a legend. I have found this legend countless times, which puts some aura of authenticity to it. Since it came from many widely separated places, it did not happen, and it's more of a supreme coincidence that it did happen in so many places all over the world concurrently. If it is a conspiracy to create so many identical legends, it would have taken an incredible comprehensive and titanic effort to formulate it all over the world, and would have not given one person away. One person would have not had to have given the fraud away. The legend is this: at the beginning of a cataclysm, or maybe just minutes or hours before the start, a plethora of space vehicles descend and pick up those whom they can so that they may be able to survive. The legend describes the scramble aboard the survivors to be, and many of the space vehicles landing at each location. Only survivors not taken could relate it. If it happens to you, prepare for their ability to communicate with you so that you can hear them in your head before they land and answer. Always be sure to think precisely the words you say, for it's your thoughts that they receive, and may the great designer be with you. He says, when you keep these thoughts, bear this verse in mind, and then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the uttermost part of earth and the uttermost part of heaven. After Effects. Now is just about the right time to review the after effects of a cataclysm. It's difficult to imagine, so there are constructive byproducts of a cataclysm. In past cataclysms, or perhaps due to only one cataclysm, some species have been eliminated which hamper the growth of a situation and progress by the human race. The good example is dinosaurs. Our civilization since the last cataclysm, known as Noah's or Upanishim's flood, grew steadily at a reasonable rate just a few centuries ago, when it started to upward turn to a reproductive rate which was now rampant, uncontrollable, and with no concern for any responsibilities or consequences whatsoever. During the time of reasonable growth, appalling and unchanged authority was vested in the religions and witch doctrine. And if we look at one statistic alone, the Inquisition, which lasted over 7 centuries, there were over 3 million humans executed in the warped name of Christianity, most by burning alive at the stake, and 98% of those murdered at the stake were women. Appalling authority still exists today on a stupendous scale in slavery, prostitution, female saying, law, judiciary, medicine, banking, government, and plus an astounding authority on being a criminal or rapist, and just a husband in many countries. Religions, narcotics, trade strong enough to defeat the IRS, plus including any government, and more. We are witnessing an assault on our planet on a scale incomparable to any other time in known history. Pollutants are dumped into the oceans and are destroying the oceanographic ecology worldwide. Pollutants dumped into the atmosphere or burning organic matter are destroying our air purity worldwide. Pollutants dumped into the rivers are destroying those rivers, but further destroying the oceans which the rivers flow. The rainforests of the world are being destroyed and burned at a rate which is staggering. Timber forests are being harvested and destroyed at an unprecedented rate. Take Cape Cod, Massachusetts, for instance, its unique modern civilization in today's modern USA that has no water supply other than the groundwater. Wells are the only source of water, and further, the only sewage system available is septic tanks. City governments on the Cape have allowed developers and builders to build, and develop, bringing in more pollutants until the ability of the ground to give pure water and take in sewage is not far from its ultimate doom. And financial pollution, it took World War II to end the 1930s depression. Will it take the next cataclysm to terminate our government's financial debauchery that started over 80 years ago? The greed has so invaded our civilization that it has caused us severe degradation in both of our government and that of our financial industry, and it's so degraded the industry that disregard for both laws and common sense is practiced concerning the infusion of terrible pollutants into our planet, practiced in the interest of profit. Natural resources are being depleted to where the end of supplies in nature can be foreseen. Behavioral, moral, societal, and religious standards are deteriorating at a rate never before seen in written history. Terrorism is now a tool of the church and state. The only comparable period is the 7 centuries of the Inquisition, when the period of deterioration through degradation of religious authority. The cataclysm accomplishes many things. It stops the unbridlable, irresistible reproduction, being the best population regulator known. It reshuffles all of the Earth's natural resources and stops the worldwide pollution of our planet, and provides restoration of pure water and lakes, rivers, oceans, and provides for restoration of forests, rainforests, and the world over, and stops man's process of dehumanizing himself with narcotics, mass crime, and terrible authority. It provides the time for restoration of the ocean freshwater life, plus restoration of the pure atmosphere, and above all, it gives mankind a chance to start over once more, and this time to do it right without intellectual or spiritual imprisonments. And that's it. It's like fear porn. I mean, all of that was completely removed from the CIA's version of the book. So maybe the CIA sanitized it out there because they didn't want you to know. They don't even give you a picture of what Mr. Chan Thomas looks like, but that's what Mr. Thomas or Dr. Thomas looks like. Dr. Thomas attended Dartmouth College and Columbia University, graduating from the later in electrical and engineering. As a result of his research analysis since 1949, Dr. Thomas has become recognized as the world's leading authority in cataclysmology. His cross-correlation research in cataclysmology has demonstrated that cataclysmological concepts as presented in Deluxe in 1779 and Kiyo in 1812 are definitely more acceptable within the international scientific circles than had been previously. His process by which nature makes gravity has withstood the test of predictability and has enabled him to analyze its sightings of spacecraft and present plausible analysis on how these crafts were constructed. He devoted 20 years of writing the Adam and Eve stories, which includes 7 years retranslating Genesis 1, 2, and 3, which he was awarded the Doctor of Divinity degree and subsequently ordained as a non-secretariat minister. He is the only person to have formalized the science of cataclysmology, achieved through this first cross-correlating known accepted data and towards providing and disproving whether cataclysms have happened, and then delving into the process of cataclysms, followed by the time schedule of cataclysms and the 15 years of research in deriving their actual trigger. And then he gives us a bunch of different books to read. These are the books that he says that you should take with you. But anyways, this is it. If you think we should not be concerned, so take some time to think on this. The United States Geological Survey says independent research physicists have issued a statement that the Earth's magnetic field is decreasing at an accelerating rate. In the past 350 years, approximately, the Earth's magnetic field strength has decreased 35 to 40%. This is a tremendous drop. The entire solar system is approaching the Milky Way null zone, a magnetic null zone, which means that an MHD null zone layer, our 60-mile thick, 250,000 or 2,500 degree Fahrenheit molten layer, will be freed once more to act as free liquid. And you might want to read the very first chapter again, and on page 107 and so forth. A bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing, or it can be a vibrant seed, giving rise to verdant fortresses and awakening sleeping giants. And that's it. And that's it. Fred Nutty, this is the real version. I'm so sick and tired of it, people saying that. So, that was, in fact, the real version, 100% real version of Chan Tonami's book. I don't know why so many retards that are watching this on Twitch and YouTube are like, I can't wait to see the real book. Retard, this is the real book. It's the real book, photocopied, like 10 years ago. I'm the fucking one who did it. Like, this is the whole book with everything, including little notes that were written, handwritten, and placed inside of the book. This isn't your CIA. This isn't your CIA disinformation shit. We viewed the CIA book, and then we went and got the book that they actually, before they actually sanitized it. The book didn't get sanitized until after it was released sometime in 1995. But the book still exists out there in a plethora of different spaces. The book itself was classified in 1994 and was declassified, aka sanitized, in 2013. There's no question in anybody's mind, including mine, that this is the full version of the book from start to finish, every single page. The only reason we're going to be going to a library to locate a 1963 copy is so that I can prove to you that the original copy was only about 45 to 54 pages, depending on how you count the pages. And it was only basically a smaller version of this thing, is because most of the research that Chan Thomas did into this book wasn't completed until the 90s. And the last little thing before I go, one of my roommates when I was growing up, his name was Chris Thomas, or Christ Thomas, Christopher Thomas. His father was named Chan Thomas. Chan Thomas lived in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I actually met him a couple of times. And 100%, yes, he is a member of the Illuminati, and yes, he is one of those people that was saying that, hey, the world's gonna end. I hope you guys are ready. And that's the little secret. That's how I got the book. That's how I have this, is because I actually know who Chan Thomas is. I've met him personally, and I'm friends with his son. Anyways, thanks for reading the book with me. Hopefully you guys take some time to really understand what I'm trying to tell you here, and why this is so important at this particular point in time now, and why it has so much accoutrement to what is happening with this viral thing. People are losing their minds, folks, but they're not losing their minds in the way that you think. It's because literally people are falling apart magnetically because there isn't enough MHD to support all of us anymore. Can't you see it? I mean, people in the chat are sitting there talking shit and just being like, oh, this is a UFO CIA book. Keep telling yourself that, dummy. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing it for you. Because remember, we're always watching out for you. Anyways, thanks for joining us for the final reading of the aftermath of the Adam and Eve story, the completely unredacted version of the book. We've gone through all of the CIA redactions at this point, and it looks like we won't need a part 2. Anyways, thank you so much for being here today, and I'll see you again on the next one. Peace. CERN is trying to strengthen the magnetic field of the planet to thereby try to stave off the next global catastrophe. So all those fucking idiots that are like, CERN's trying to destroy the planet.